My ex-husband's best friend once made a bet over grilled ribs that I'd cry when I got served divorce papers during Christmas dinner. Adam, my husband, laughed and said, "Of course she will. She always cries." What they didn't realize was that I had just stepped into the hallway with a tray of cranberry spritzers, and I heard every word. I stood there frozen, trying to steady my breath while the glasses rattled faintly on the tray. They didn't know I was listening. Adam's voice came through clearly, smooth and certain, like someone making a confident prediction about a weather forecast. "She's soft," he said, like it was a known fact. "Women like her fold under pressure." That was 5 days before Christmas. But the cracks had started long before that dinner party, long before the bet or the smug smirks. It didn't begin with shouting or cheating. It began with small things, little jokes at my expense. Like the first time Adam told his friends at a barbecue, if I left tomorrow, Claire would still be waiting at the door with a casserole. They all laughed. I laughed too. But something twisted inside me, something I couldn't quite name. At first, I told myself he was just being funny. That's how Adam was, charming in a careless way. He always had a beer in one hand and a comment in the other. People liked him. My parents liked him. Even my friends, at the beginning. He never raised his voice, never hit me, never even called me a terrible name. So, what was I going to say? That he made me feel small in public? That he looked right through me when I talked? That he rolled his eyes whenever I wore the red dress he once said he loved? I stopped wearing that dress after he said, "Trying a little hard tonight, aren't we?" While we were heading out to his office party. He said it with a grin. I laughed along. But that dress stayed in the back of my closet from then on. I started catching myself before I spoke in front of others. I'd look at him, trying to read if my words would bring that tone again. The one that sliced more than screamed. "You're lucky I'm still around," he'd say sometimes. "Let's be real. What would you even do without me?" Then he'd smile like he was just joking. Everyone always said Adam was so witty. I used to believe that too. In private, things were quiet. Not peaceful. Just quiet. He didn't hit. He didn't yell. But his disapproval filled the house like smoke. When my mom came over for a visit and left her mug in the sink, he made sure to say loudly enough, "Surprise, surprise, Claire didn't clean up." When I forgot to grab his dry cleaning, he muttered, "Useless," not looking at me. Just loud enough for it to sting. Not loud enough for anyone else to hear. And I told myself that maybe this was just marriage. Not perfect, but steady. He worked, paid the bills, didn't cheat, at least as far as I knew. Maybe I was just too sensitive. Maybe other women felt this way too and just didn't talk about it. But the truth started leaking in little by little. At a company gala, he got tipsy after 2 drinks and leaned over to me while a woman in a blue dress walked past. "You're all the same," he said, voice low. "Needy. Always asking for more." I didn't even know what he was referring to. But I didn't ask. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and smiled while heat crept up my neck and settled in my chest. Later that night, I poured him a drink at home, like I always did. My smile felt stiff, but it stayed on my face. "You always joke about leaving," I said, trying to keep it light. "Maybe we should just sign something, just in case." He laughed, tossed his head back, and scribbled his name on a napkin. "There. Take it to court if you want. Protect my fantasy football winnings," he joked. Then he passed out. He didn't remember the napkin the next day. But I did. The next morning, I tucked it into a folder marked, Utilities 2022, and locked it away. Then I called my best friend, Marla. She didn't ask why. She just looked at me for a long moment, then reached into her desk drawer and handed me a pen. "Do you want this notarized?" she asked quietly. I nodded. From that day, I started watching Adam differently. Not with fear. Not even with sadness. But with a new awareness. I started keeping a journal. Nothing fancy. Just a plain notebook I slid under my side of the mattress. Every comment, every late return, every weird receipt, I wrote it all down. I didn't think I was planning anything. Not then. It felt more like self-preservation. Like if I just collected enough evidence, maybe one day I could look at it and remind myself that it wasn't all in my head. But things shifted faster than I expected. One night, at his company's New Year's party, he told a group of junior staff that my hobby was burning through his credit card. Everyone laughed. I didn't. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I saw someone I didn't recognize. Someone quiet. Someone tired. But not broken. After that, I started saving digital files too. I scanned receipts. Took screenshots. The day I found a hotel receipt in his jeans from Valentine's Day. A night he claimed to be on a business trip. I didn't say anything. I logged it, dated it, saved it. Strawberries, 2 glasses of red wine, and a hotel suite downtown. At dinner that night when he said, "If we ever split, you'd come crawling back," I smiled and said, "You're probably right." But I didn't believe it anymore. Not even a little. That's the thing about silence in a marriage like ours. It grows. It becomes part of the wallpaper, the air between two people. I could hear it in the clink of the cutlery, in the way we stopped asking each other about our day. One night I woke up from a bad dream, his voice in my head saying, "You'll be nothing." But even in that fog of sleep, something inside me whispered back, "That's not true." I had the napkin. I had the files. I had time. That night, I stopped pretending. I didn't leave. I didn't scream. But I became something different. I became quiet, polite, measured. The kind of woman who asks about your day while storing your lies like files in a cabinet. He didn't notice. That was the part that surprised me the most. He actually thought I was calming down. That I was over whatever mood I'd been in. He started acting like his old self again, more careless, more smug. One day, I stood in Marla's office with the napkin in my hand. She unfolded it, read it slowly, and raised her eyebrows. "He signed this?" "Yep," I said. "No pressure? No threats?" "None." She leaned back in her chair and gave me a look I hadn't seen since we were teenagers plotting harmless pranks in school. Except this time, it wasn't a prank. It was preparation. "We'll reinforce it," she said. "Make sure it holds. Just in case he tries something first." And we did. She cleaned up the language, added clarifications, and stored it with all the proper stamps. I left her office with a copy on a flash drive, another in a sealed envelope, and a quiet certainty humming in my chest. I wasn't rushing anything. I didn't even know when I'd use it. But I knew one day he'd test me again. And when he did, I'd be ready. Adam didn't notice the change in me. That was the strange part. You'd think a man would sense when the woman he lives with starts quietly preparing for war. But no. He thought I was softening. That I had finally let it go. He relaxed more each week, assuming he'd won some kind of invisible argument. He started staying out later, sometimes not even offering excuses. And when he did, they barely made sense. A meeting ran long. His phone died. Traffic. Always traffic. I smiled and nodded. Inside, I kept track of every unexplained charge. Every evening he came home smelling like a mix of hotel soap and cologne he didn't wear when he left the house. I wrote it all down. I didn't cry about it. I didn't confront him. I saved it. There was one night, though, that settled things for me. We were at a friend's cookout in early fall. Everyone was gathered near the grill, drinks in hand, music playing low from a Bluetooth speaker. I was arranging fruit on a tray when I overheard Adam's best friend, Mark, say something while laughing too loud. "She won't last 2 days if you leave, man. You've got it made." Adam laughed along like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "She's too attached. Can't even figure out the Wi-Fi without me." I didn't even flinch. I placed the last piece of pineapple next to the strawberries and walked back toward the house to grab the napkins. My face didn't give me away. Not even a twitch. I had learned how to be still, how to carry quiet rage like it was just another tray of appetizers. That week, I started recording certain conversations. Just the ones that felt important. When he said too much, or made comments he would later pretend never happened. I labeled each recording by date and subject, then uploaded it all to a private folder Marla had created for me years ago. Just in case, she'd said. And now, I finally understood what just in case looked like. I even started using a planner. A simple one. In it, I made symbols that only I understood. A circle for a suspicious purchase. A star for a lie I caught him in. A A check mark for every time he forgot where he said he'd been. Anyone else would think it was just meal planning or to-do lists. But to me it was a map. Eventually, I stopped reacting altogether. When he came home late, I asked if he was hungry. When he made a joke at my expense, I laughed softly and changed the subject. When he texted staying late for the third night in a row, I sent back, okay, smiley face, and went back to organizing folders. I became a mirror. He saw what he wanted to see. And that's when he got sloppy. He left his phone face up more often. Left emails open on the shared laptop. I didn't snoop. I didn't need to. The proof spilled out like it wanted to be found. Messages from him, reservations for places we'd never been together, compliments he never gave me. I saved them all. One message 2 weeks before Christmas ended the game. He'd had too much to drink and fallen asleep with his phone unlocked. A message thread popped up with a notification banner. I glanced once. It was enough. A woman named Melissa. The message read, "She doesn't suspect anything. I'm serving her on Christmas. Front row seats, babe." It had a laughing emoji attached. I didn't panic. I didn't feel sick. I read it twice, screenshot it, then quietly deleted the message from the thread. Then I forwarded it to Marla and titled the email, "For safekeeping." I laid in bed that night beside him, staring at the ceiling. Not because I was scared, but because I was thinking through the details. What kind of gift wrap to use? Where to place the document? Who would be there? What time dinner usually ended? He thought he was about to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. That I'd sob, run out of the room, make a scene that would fuel his ego for years. But he had forgotten something. He was the one who handed me the pen. He was the one who scribbled his name on that napkin. He was the one who underestimated me every day for years. The plan came together slowly. I wasn't rushing. I kept cooking his meals, kept laughing at his jokes in front of his co-workers. I even complimented his new haircut, even though it looked exactly the same. He started calling me babe again. Started holding my hand in public. He thought he had broken me so well that I had curled back into his side willingly. But he didn't see how sharp I'd become. That week before Christmas was almost surreal. I baked his favorite cookies. Decorated the tree just how he liked it. White lights only, no colored bulbs. I smiled as he bragged about the roast he planned to carve for dinner. "My famous turkey," he said. "Wait till everyone sees." He even winked at me. I winked back. The night before, I called Marla. I told her the whole plan. Every detail. She didn't say much. Just told me to double-check the folder one more time. Make sure every document was in place. It was. Christmas morning, I woke early and started prepping everything. Tablecloth, silverware, candles. I folded each napkin into a small triangle like his mother liked. I even laid out the sweater he loved wearing for pictures. The maroon one with the tiny snowflakes on the sleeves. That afternoon, everyone arrived. His parents brought wine. My sister showed up with her famous sweet potatoes. Laughter filled the room. It felt like any normal holiday. Except it wasn't. Not for me. I floated through the day like a hostess on autopilot. Smiling. Refilling glasses. Making small talk. I didn't eat much. My hands were too steady for food. The anticipation was like a quiet drumbeat in my chest. Adam looked smug the whole evening. He laughed louder than usual. Told stories like he was holding court. When he caught my eye across the room, he gave me a look, something between pity and arrogance. After dinner, when the plates were cleared and the wine buzz settled over the room, Mark leaned over and whispered something to Adam. Adam stood up with theatrical flair and tapped his wine glass with a knife. "Before dessert," he said, "I have something special for my lovely wife." I could see Marla from across the room. Her eyes flicked to me. I gave her a small nod. Adam walked toward me with a wide grin. In his hand was a plain white envelope. No ribbon. No card. Just paper. "Merry Christmas, Claire," he said, placing it in front of me. The table quieted. Even my sister looked confused, waiting for something romantic. I opened the envelope calmly. Inside were the divorce papers. Already signed. Already dated. He had even highlighted a line at the bottom. I looked up. He smiled, like he'd just delivered the punchline of a joke he'd been rehearsing for weeks. I smiled back. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out a pen. I clicked it, signed the document in one motion, capped it, and handed it right back to him. He blinked. "That's it?" he asked. "That's it," I said. Then I reached under the table and pulled out a small gold box. I placed it gently in front of his plate. "What's this?" he asked, a little less sure now. "Your real gift," I said. He opened it. Inside was a leather folder. The moment his eyes hit the first line, I saw his face lose color. His mouth parted slightly. His fingers tensed. Mark leaned over, peeking inside. "What is it?" I answered. "The agreement Adam signed last January. Fully notarized. Fully filed. Reinforced with an addendum. And completely legal." "I filed first," Adam said suddenly, like that would erase what he was holding. "Exactly," I said with a calm smile. "Which makes it valid under your timeline. Your terms. Your signature." Nobody spoke. His father stared. His mother set her glass down. And then, I reached into my purse again. "One last thing," I said. I pulled out a smaller envelope and handed it to him. He opened it slowly. It was a sonogram photo. "I'm pregnant," I said. 8 weeks. The room shifted. I could feel it. Not dramatically. Just settled. Adam's smile twitched. Then faded. "You planned this," he said quietly. "I's not meeting mine." "No," I said. "You did." Adam stared at the photo like it was in a different language. For a second, he looked like he might smile. His mouth even twitched upward, probably out of instinct. But then the realization started to crawl across his face. What it meant, what it could mean. Prenup. Baby. Custody. Assets. All the things he thought he controlled, suddenly shifting away from him like sand under his feet. "You planned this," he said again, voice quieter now, almost a whisper. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smirk. I just looked him in the eye and said, "You bet I'd cry. You thought I'd crumble. I didn't plan. I prepared." The silence around the table was loud enough to feel. Mark was frozen with his wine glass halfway to his mouth. My sister, Lila, reached under the table and gently grabbed my hand. Her thumb pressed against mine like she was reminding me that I wasn't alone. Adam's mother pushed her chair back just slightly, her mouth pressed into a tight line. His father wiped his glasses even though they weren't dirty. No one said a word. It was like they were all waiting to see what would happen next. Adam kept staring at the folder. Like maybe if he stared hard enough he could make it vanish. I stood up calmly and began stacking dessert plates that hadn't been touched yet. "Apple or pecan?" I asked the room. No one answered. Everyone was still too stunned. Adam finally broke the silence with, "You think you've won?" I didn't bother replying. Not with words. I walked over to the kitchen counter and grabbed a clean plate. I placed a slice of apple pie on it, topped it with a small scoop of whipped cream, and walked back to my seat like it was just another Tuesday. "I'll have the locks changed tomorrow," I said, sitting down and taking a bite. Adam sat frozen, his face blank. He looked around the room like he was searching for someone to defend him. Someone to tell him this wasn't real, that it wasn't fair. But no one did. Even Mark, his right-hand guy, kept his head down, looking more confused than anything. There was no yelling. No one flipped a chair or slammed a door. It was just quiet. A different kind of quiet than the silence I had lived in for years. This one didn't feel like fear. It felt like peace. Adam slowly pushed back from the table, the legs of his chair scraping across the floor. He stood, his voice stiff and bitter. "You think this makes you strong? You think you've finally got something over me?" I looked at him without blinking. "No. I think I finally stopped waiting for you to give me permission to leave." And then he did exactly what I knew he'd do. He tried to take control back the only way he knew how, by leaving. He turned and walked out of the room, his steps heavy, almost theatrical. He left behind the prenup, the sonogram, and what little pride he had left. The door slammed a minute later. Nobody followed him. Lila exhaled beside me, long and slow. "I always hated that sweater," she muttered, nodding toward the reindeer-stitched maroon monstrosity he had on earlier. A small, nervous laugh bubbled up around the table. It started with my cousin Elena, then Lila, and finally Adam's own mother gave a short, surprised chuckle, covering her mouth with a napkin like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to laugh. I took another bite of pie and leaned into my sister. "Merry Christmas," I said softly. That night, Lila didn't leave. She pulled out the spare bedding and stayed in the guest room without even asking. "You're not waking up alone tomorrow," she told me. "Not after tonight." I didn't argue. We didn't say much. We didn't have to. We just sat on the couch with the lights from the tree flickering softly behind us, and a warm blanket between us. Later, when I finally went upstairs, the bed still smelled like his cologne. Expensive and cold, like everything he was. I opened every window and let the winter air run through the room until the scent thinned out, and the walls felt like mine again. The next morning he was gone. No note. No message. Nothing. The house was still. I made myself breakfast for the first time in weeks without worrying about how loud the toaster was, or whether he'd complain about the eggs. I didn't have to think about how many crumbs I left on the counter. I just made my food and ate it in silence. At 9 a.m., I called a locksmith. "Emergency or standard?" the man on the phone asked. "Standard," I replied. Then I paused and added, "But make it fast." He arrived that afternoon, quiet and kind. He didn't ask questions when I handed him Adam's keys and said, "Please make sure none of these work anymore." When he left, I stood in the hallway for a moment, staring at the new key in my hand. It was just a piece of metal, but it felt like something bigger. It was the first thing I'd owned alone in years. Not the house, not officially, not yet. But the space, the safety, the air. That was mine now. That evening, I moved into the master bedroom. I stripped the bed, tossed the old sheets into a black trash bag. I found a box of candles I hadn't used in forever, sandalwood and cedar. I used to love that smell, but Adam always said it gave him headaches. I lit 3 and watched the flicker of flame dance across the walls. The room looked different in that light. Softer. Warmer. Like it was waiting for me to return to it. The mail started coming in with red stamps on the envelopes. Final notice. Overdue. Immediate attention required. I stacked them neatly by the door and didn't forward a single one. Marla called that evening. Her voice was practically bubbling. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Try me." Adam's lawyer called me this morning. Apparently, he was stunned when he realized what we'd done. His face must have looked like someone knocked the wind out of him. "Is it official? He's lost at least 70% of his assets overnight. And with the baby coming." She paused, clearly enjoying the moment. "He'll need a payment plan just to write your check." I smiled into the phone. Not because I cared about the money. Not even close. I smiled because I could finally sit in my living room without walking on glass. I could finally breathe. "You've always had this in you," Marla said gently. "You just needed to believe it." That part almost made me cry. Over the next few weeks, things changed in quiet ways. Some friends stopped calling. A few unfollowed me on social media. Others sent weird texts that tried not to pick sides. But there were small bursts of support too. A woman I hadn't spoken to in 2 years sent me a message. "I wish I had your strength." A few days later, a bouquet of peonies showed up at my door with no note. I had a feeling they were from Claire, Adam's assistant. She always noticed more than she let on. At some point, the gossip reached his office. People whispered. Meetings grew awkward. His jokes didn't land anymore. The guy who once made fun of clingy wives now sat alone during lunch breaks. I bought lavender soap again. Painted the nursery a soft green. The color Adam once said looked like toothpaste. I found an old stuffed giraffe in a donation bin and placed it gently in the corner of the room. I started humming while folding laundry. I hadn't done that since our 2nd anniversary. One day, I passed Adam on the street. He was walking out of a bank, talking into his phone, looking irritated. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did. But he didn't know what to say. That night, Marla sent me a screenshot. His name had been quietly removed from the company's quarterly newsletter. I replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. Then I made myself tea, sat by the window, and watched the wind pull at the curtains like soft fingers brushing against a new future. I didn't think about revenge anymore. Not really. What used to feel like a battle slowly turned into something quieter, softer. It wasn't about getting even. It was about freedom, peace, the simple comfort of living without fear, without second-guessing every word or every glance across the dinner table. The first time I felt her kick, I was barefoot in the kitchen, humming along to an old song on the radio and slicing peaches for a pie. It was so faint at first, like a tiny tap from the inside. I stopped, unsure if I imagined it. Then it happened again. I dropped the knife onto the cutting board and pressed both hands to my belly. She kicked again. I stood still, smiling through tears I didn't expect. Not sad tears. Not even relief. Just this overwhelming feeling that said, I'm not alone anymore. She was real. She was growing. She was mine. That night, I opened a new journal. A leather one with thick, soft pages. On the first page, I wrote just one sentence. This baby will never hear yelling through a door. Then I added another line underneath. She'll never think love means walking on eggshells. I underlined that one twice. From then on, I wrote something every evening. Sometimes a sentence. Sometimes a full page. Some entries were just notes to myself. What I ate that day, what names I liked, how the nursery smelled after I cleaned it. My cousin Elena moved in around the start of my second trimester. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a tray of homemade blueberry muffins and said, I'm here. No arguments. She made herself at home like she had lived there for years, wearing fuzzy socks in the middle of July and constantly losing her phone between couch cushions. We fell into an easy rhythm. She worked remotely from the kitchen table, muttering at spreadsheets while sipping iced coffee with way too much sugar. She didn't bring up Adam unless I did, which I rarely did anymore. That part of the story felt like it belonged to a past life. Marla dropped by often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with baby books that had sticky notes in the margins. Don't name her Tiffany, she wrote on one page. Not because it's a bad name, but because a Tiffany once cut my hair with safety scissors in 3rd grade. Trauma. We laughed more during those months than I had in years. Real laughter. Not the kind you force for peace, but the kind that just rolls out of you without permission. The nursery came together slowly. I painted the walls soft yellow, refinished a second-hand dresser, and sewed tiny cloud-patterned curtains that fluttered in the breeze. A rocking chair arrived in a giant box, and Elena spent hours trying to assemble it before finally yelling, "This is your villain origin story." We laughed until our sides hurt. One Sunday, while cleaning the hallway closet, I found a box I hadn't opened in years. I knew what it was before I touched it. The old wedding photos. I sat on the living room floor and opened it. There we were, smiling in every picture. His arm around my waist. My eyes full of hope. All of it felt like it had happened to someone else. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I slid each photo into a separate envelope, labeled the box to release, and drove it straight to a donation center. I handed it over without ceremony. Just walked away, feeling lighter than I had in months. On the way home, I stopped at a bookstore and bought another blank journal. This one I labeled, Plans That Are Only Mine. By the time Christmas came around again, the house felt different. Lighter. Warmer. The dining table was smaller. The guest list shorter. No over-the-top centerpieces or polished silver. Just candles and soft music playing in the background. Lila brought her toddler who kept dropping mashed potatoes and shouting boom, like he was performing magic. My dad carved the turkey while Elena tried to make vegan gravy, and failed gloriously. Marla showed up with a date, her first in over a year. I didn't feel jealous or sad. I felt full. Whole. Next to Lila's son sat a new high chair. White with little yellow stars. And in it the love of my life. My daughter. She had his eyes, maybe. It was hard to tell. But everything else was mine. Her little hands gripped the tray. Her cheeks rosy from the cold. Her mouth full of gibberish that she delivered like it was the most important speech in the world. I didn't check the time. I didn't listen for footsteps. I didn't plan answers in my head just in case someone said the wrong thing. I was just there. Present. Every laugh, every bite, every shared glance at the table felt like a quiet celebration. Later that night, after everyone else drifted to the kitchen or out for a walk, I stayed behind by the fireplace. My daughter was asleep on my chest, her tiny breaths warm through my sweater. I held her close, breathing her in. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon, not fear, not tension, just peace. I took a sip of cocoa and whispered softly to her. He said I'd be nothing without him. She stirred a little in her sleep, curling her fingers. I kissed her forehead and smiled. Turns out, I murmured, I'm everything without him.